Welcome to National Hog Farmer at the Slat Level. I'm Ann Hess. Today our topic is biosecurity, better execution. And on hand we have Matt Romoser, Swine Field Specialist with the Iowa Pork Industry Center. Welcome, Matt, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Before we jump into today's discussion, I'd like to remind the audience tuning in, you can post any questions you may have in the chat, and we'll be sure to get those over to Matt. So, Matt, for those who might not be familiar with the Iowa Pork Industry Center, tell us more about it, its mission, and your role there.
Yeah, so I like to think of the Iowa Pork Industry Center, or as a lot of producers may refer to it as IPIC. We're essentially we're the extension arm of ISU Extension and Outreach, specifically for the pork industry. So our mission is obviously to bring data-backed, research-supported data information to producers to obviously help them be efficient in their operations, resilient, and stay in business, obviously, for a stronger and more vibrant pork industry in the state of Iowa. So it's a great, uh, I would say, piece of Iowa State's extension outreach, and that's where my role as a field specialist is I think valuable, or something that I enjoy, and the fact that I get to help bring a lot of that data out into the field. I serve Southeast Iowa. There's 5 regions within the state, and so I get to work with producers down in Southeast Iowa, bringing some of the outcomes and so forth that we put together here on campus.
Very good. Well, the Iowa Pork Industry Center recently hosted a series of biosecurity workshops to review farm protocol, discuss current challenges, and maybe learn best practices for preventing disease outbreaks. Detail for us the objectives the team was hoping to achieve and maybe some of the feedback and response you got from participants.
Yeah, so we held we've held and continue to offer biosecurity workshops across the state. A lot of this, obviously, in partnership with some support from the Iowa Pork Producers Association, and really kind of what the goal is just to be able to bring a little bit different spin and perspective on how we implement biosecurity fundamentals and practices. It's obviously it's a challenge in biosecurity because it's not always the most fun topic to discuss. It's one of those things. It's a lot of times it's a difficult topic to teach because it's just kind of daily expectations are set for employees, but maybe not always conveyed as to why they have to do certain practices in farm on farm or what the benefits are. So we want to be able to bring sort of a program out to the producers where we can really just review some of those practices and allow them to actually go through some of those procedures or review some of those procedures without actually having to physically be on site. I think that's kind of the beauty of these workshops, and the fact that we hold them at at any um, you know facility, meeting space, shop area, what have you, where we can pull in our biosecurity trailer and so forth, or a classroom setting. We don't actually have to be at a physical site where we're potentially introducing a biosecurity risk at the same time, right? So I think that's kind of the beauty of these type of workshops. And a lot of times it just takes, from a teaching standpoint, maybe instead of someone hearing biosecurity rules and SOPs from a supervisor, maybe hearing it from a little bit different lens through our roles as field specialists, as maybe a little bit different mode of communication or educator standpoint. So that was kind of the goal and intent. And I think it's one of those things you wouldn't think from a feedback standpoint that there's a lot of people who are at least fairly well versed in biosecurity, but a lot of the feedback we've got is there's at least still some knowledge transfer that happens, even if it's general protocols that people are fairly comfortable with and fairly familiar with. It's just a matter of maybe practicing them and engaging in feedback with coworkers or with us. That I think there's still some learning that's occurring, and I think that's beneficial for the industry.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a look at each of the biosecurity protocols you covered during the workshop, starting with, proper bench entry and in putting on PPE. What are we getting right? What are we getting wrong?
Yeah. So when I think about just basic biosecurity fundamentals, the challenge with biosecurity is it's hard. We really don't have a good way to measure it, right? Like on farm, we have lots of KPIs and production metrics that we can sit there and base off of, and we can gauge improvement or maybe where we've regressed in some areas. Where biosecurity, we really don't have good ways or concrete ways to measure it. And I like to think of it as it's essentially a scoreboard that starts over every single day, right? It's the score 0-0 every time you go to work that morning or anytime somebody goes on farm. So it's one of those things like the consistency aspect of it is what we really try to teach here. So when you think you specifically mentioned like bench entry or like what you see the photos on screen where participants are putting on. What we have here is Tyvek suits. Obviously, on farm would be farm coveralls, footwear, what have you, right? But it's specific with bench entry, just making sure we're obeying certain lines of separation. And when we go through a shower in, shower out facility, obviously making sure that clothing or towels or whatever we have specific on farm, all that obeys a clean line, dirty line type protocol. And what we've got here with some of these participants on screen here, putting on a Tyvek, we use a tool, glow germ, essentially an extremely fine powder that glows or fluoresces under a black light. So we can essentially use that to sort of mimic how germs would spread. So in this instance, these participants apply glow germ to the outside of their Tyveks, mimicking any type of contaminant, right? So obviously on farms aren't the cleanest environments. We're gonna have certain types of germs, bacteria, viruses, whatever, are going to get on clothing. So it's a matter in this instance, do they put this PPE on, and then the objective then is try to be able to take that farm clothing off in as biosecure of a manner as possible, and then we can essentially use that glow germ to say, okay, did we get on the wrist or the cuff from our Tyvek? Did we get it on the bottom of our shoe as we were taking off this farm clothing? So it's kind of an interesting teaching point, just to kind of reinforce, hey, every single thing that I do kind of has to be approached with a biosecurity mindset, whether it's entering the farm, leaving the farm, going from site to site. I think it's kind of a good reinforcement practice there.
Well, you mentioned the biosecurity trailer. Why don't you take us in there and walk us through some of the proper protocols, best practices that you demonstrate in the trailer as employees would be entering the barn?
Yeah, so this is a really neat tool that the IPIC has had for a few years now, and these workshops that we've had has kind of been the first opportunity we've had to really roll them out statewide to producers. But obviously with this, it's set up to mimic as closely as we can on a pull behind trailer typical entry into a facility. So you can see here that live on screen where we've got some Danish entry systems set up, similar to what you might have on multiple sites, whether that's sow farm, wean to finish farm, just trying to establish those lines of separation, right? And a clean, dirty side and a deliberate side where we want to be able to keep outside footwear or outside supplies on one side and try to mitigate any type of introductory or disease coming in. As we go forward in this case on the video here, putting on a Tyvek and gloves and boots. In this case, obviously on farm, this is going to be farm specific clothing, but it's just a matter of a lot of times how we'll execute this in practice then is we may use some of that glow germ maybe at the front of the trailer or even outside the trailer, and participants will walk through it effectively, quote unquote, contaminating the bottom of their shoes, right? And then as they go through that, really we kind of use as a teaching point to make sure, okay, if we only put the glow germ on the outside of the trailer, did any of it actually get tracked into the trailer or effectively into the barn? So it's kind of a good visual appraisal or visual assessment. How good of a job did we do at keeping virus, bacteria, any type of contaminant on the exterior or outside of the barn versus bringing it in and bringing it past those lines of separation. So that's what I think the trailer actually is kind of a valuable tool from that standpoint, because it allows us to actually visually see, okay, how effective were we at mitigating tracking anything to into a barn, which we can't do effectively in the field with bacteria and viruses, right? Outside of swabbing and testing routinely, there's not an easy way to practically do that on farms. So being able to practice something like this in the trailer allows for a quick, easy sort of visual appraisal, again, without the risk of any sort of disease spread pressure that way.
Well, I want to go back to this glow germ. It's a pretty unique product, and it obviously this exercise helped participants make better biosecurity choices. Walk us through this exercise and what kind of takeaways they got from it.
Yeah, so on the visual here, so what we do here is we use basically shaving cream as sort of a carrying agent, right? So we'll use shaving cream and then mix it with some glow germ. It's usually a very minute amount of powder, and they can, essentially put it on their coveralls. And again, it's that same PPE exercises. Can we get through, exit out of our farm clothing without it getting any contaminant on this instance? And then we've got some visuals here of I believe sow farm employees kind of working how to exchange gloves in between litters. Particularly, might be practices executed in sort of a PRRS outbreak scenario where we're trying to mitigate PRRS virus spread within a barn after a certain period of time. So in this case, we've got a pig, a foam pig in the bucket here that has a little bit of the glow germ attached to it or spread onto it, really fine amount. But the problem is, or the I should say, the beauty of it maybe is that glow germ is very sticky, so it adheres to surfaces very easily for a powder. And these participants here just practicing changing gloves as they handle a pig that would effectively be contaminated with what disease, whether that's PED, PRRS, uh, you know, rotavirus, what have you, at a particular age in this scenario. So, kind of interesting little visual here, and as you can see, there's some good examples of how that can spread, and how cognizant, I suppose, employees have to be with all steps when we talk about changing gloves, changing clothing, changing footwear, what have you. So yeah, that's kind of the beauty of that product, is it provides instant visualization as to whether we passed or failed on a biosecurity practice.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't say, "Oh, it wasn't me."
Right,
The
exactly, exactly.
evidence is there. How about risk events and carrying agents? What specific protocols, maybe such as McRebel, should we be considering during those times?
Yeah, so I mean, carrying, when we think broadly about carrying agents, that can be anything from the animals coming on farm, whether we're bringing in a new shipment of gilts into a sow farm. Could be supplies that come onto a farm, whether that's breeding supplies, semen, vaccines, any type of thing, any type of supply we'd bring on farm could be a carrying agent. Obviously, employees are carrying agents, and in some farms where, if you've got multiple employees that enter that come to work every day, that's multiple risk events that occur within a given day. So obviously, there's lots of different carrying agents that we always have to be sort of cognizant of. And so that's where I think it's not just kind of thinking about what you do from a biosecurity standpoint, but obviously it's kind of becomes a cultural thing, right? You can do everything right as an employee, but if the culture maybe on farm isn't established, that everybody kind of is in line and focused on trying to accomplish the same goal, biosecurity can be one of those things that's pretty hard to adhere to. So that's where, when we think about carrying agents, it extends to that as well, whether it's bringing supplies on, obviously bringing in healthy animals, potential carrying agents. We can talk about outside vectors too, such as rodents, what have you. So it's a whole systems approach, I think, when it comes to mitigating risk from carrying agents. You specifically mentioned like sort of McRebel type procedures. And so, like some of those pictures we were discussing there on the prior slide, where you've got sow farm that are maybe trying to practice some of those procedures, where we're really trying to mitigate spread of disease from litter to litter. So when we think about PRRS, there's going to be a given period where those type of procedures are going to be limited in their efficacy, just simply because that virus can spread in utero, right? So you may be having pigs that are born that would be positive for PRRS, but after a certain period of time, that virus, would not be transmitted in utero. So then the goal of the farm, in order to try to mitigate and try to slow spread when farm, would then try to be able to control it at the litter level. So different things, like obviously where we see in some of those slides, changing gloves in between litters, not stepping, not ever stepping inside of crates to be able to catch pigs, changing needles or scalpels in between litters, uh, different practices and steps that we can put to just to try to mitigate spread. And I use PER as an example. Obviously, there's multiple different types of diseases where we may want to try to be able to mitigate spread. I think about PED, right? That something that can spread very quickly in a barn. Multiple cases where in those instances, maybe you're going to do a feedback regimen to try to boost the immune status of the sows and gilts on farms. So there's going to be lots of times where we're going to intentionally expose animals in that instance, but at some point we want to be able to try to mitigate spread on farms. So that's where some of those procedures kind of come into play, and I think can obviously, when executed right, can obviously just help get that farm to return back to baseline level production rather than level of production that's hindered by disease pressure.
Now, you also discussed rodent control during the workshops. Walk us through some of the best practices there.
Yeah, so obviously there's lots of different, I would say, procedures that we can put in, but I think first and foremost, trying to create an environment that's not really habitable for rodents or other types of should we say vectors? Whether it's um, we talk about mice and rats and what have you, but birds as well can all carry certain diseases that we want to be able to make sure we keep outside of the barn, right? So prevention is probably the first thing in which we want to discuss, just as far as what can we do on the outside perimeter of our barn to mitigate the desire or want for animals to be able to come in. Obviously, we think about, especially we get towards the fall time, start to get cooler nights, cooler days. Obviously wildlife, rodents maybe are starting to look for a warmer place to be able to inhabit. Uh, Inside our pig barns, we've got water and feed and warmth for them, so it's a very good environment they want to inhabit. But trying to make it even on the perimeter around our facilities with, as shown here, with sort of a 3 foot gravel buffer, at least limits any type of vegetation or habitat near the barn that rodents may want to inhabit, but also incorporating some bait stations around that perimeter as well. Obviously, they'll find those bait stations first before they ever try to, in theory, before they would try to enter into a barn, right? So putting out some type of preventative uh, measures on the exterior of the barn is important. Just from a bait station standpoint and reducing habitat. That also goes along with cleaning up spilled feed underneath bulk bins, right? They won't be as prone to enter the barn if they don't feel like it's a liable place for feed and water. I would say in here too, obviously keeping, as you see on the screen as well, keeping the barn sealed as tight as possible. That can be challenges, obviously, with curtain-sided barns and so forth. There's naturally going to be leaks that our barns are going to have, but trying to minimize those as much as possible and limit the amount of entry points can be valuable from a rodent control standpoint there as well. And I think just a lot of it goes towards even just keeping your curtains in good shape. Obviously, between cables that would run along curtains, or even just horizontal surfaces around curtains, makes it pretty easy for mice to go within barn and be able to obviously enter in the facility that way. So I think that just general maintenance and upkeep of our curtains can go a long way. And then obviously from a control standpoint, rotating different rodenticides can be beneficial as well. When we think about, we're not necessarily wanting to build up any type of resistance to one particular rodenticide. So I think in certain cases, rotating those to different grades or classes of rodenticides can help make sure that we're staying in front of any type of a rodent population from that standpoint. And then obviously just from a bait station management standpoint, checking them often and making sure that they are still equipped with some type of a rodenticide and everything is working properly. Don't have to clean them out or anything like that. So obviously for anything we've got maybe placed interior, certainly important to at least have those rodenticides with those bait chunks covered up. One thing we certainly don't want is pigs in the barn to be able to get access to those as well. So being able to make sure that they're as shown visually here, whether they're in some type of a stationary sort of PVC pipe that's obviously small enough for a rodent to enter, but not accessible by pigs in the barn. There's certainly been instances where I've gone on farm and you might see bait chunks placed in alleyways that maybe don't have access to the pigs, but if you're ever moving pigs along, it's not inconceivable to think that a curious pig wouldn't find it when being moved within barn too. So it's important just to be able to keep on top of those things, not only from a rodent control standpoint, but from a health well-being standpoint of the pig, and make sure we're not potentially exposing them to any type of rodenticide.
So, bottom line here, Matt, for pork producers, caretakers, support staff, how does poor biosecurity impact a production system's profitability and performance?
Well, it's huge, right? I mean, we talk about it at every meeting. And health is one of the main drivers in profitability, right? And even in instances right now where a lot of times we look at where corn and gray markets are fairly affordable from a feed standpoint, pork market is strong. The caveat in a lot of that can be health and the number of full value pigs that we market. And that can obviously eat away at margin and profitability for an operation. So when we think about holistically from a biosecurity standpoint, if we can execute that at a high level and we can keep our barns healthy, obviously the dividend on the back end is huge. So when we think about trying to really establish that culture on farm, as far as even the little things that and little tasks that maybe seem a little bit mundane and kind of repetitive, or even to the point of inconvenient, right? When we talk about obeying lines of separation, shower in, shower out, lots of those things maybe seem a little bit, yeah, like we said, inconvenient, mundane, but the payoff on the back end is really what we're looking for, just as far as maintaining healthy herds and then limiting spread, obviously especially within pig dense regions, right? Specifically in Southeast Iowa, where we've got lots of pigs. It's not just your system; it's other systems around you that are also subject to disease spread and risk as well. So it kind of goes along with, obviously you want to be able to take care of your herd first, but it kind of goes along with being a good neighbor as well, because limit disease spread in your herd can help around surrounding herds as well. So.
Great point to end on. Matt Romoser, Iowa Pork Industry Center, thank you so much for taking us in the barn today and sharing your expertise.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
For more pork production conversations and demos from the slat level, be sure to check out the At the Slat page on National Hog Farmer's website. For National Hog Farmer, I'm Ann Hess.